Topping Talks. 105 hours a week, can't be beat. Welcome to Topping Talks. Topping Talks is a Topping Tribune production, and today's episode is proudly sponsored by Topping Technologies and ExpressVPN. Topping Technologies is an IT value-added reseller and services company with a special proficiency in security. Heck, I say the founder at least twice a day, I have to say. Quite handsome and brilliant. If you're a business in Texas that could use us at hand, you can reach us at sales@toppingtechnologies.com. Also, are you part of the 3.6% of Americans who still care about privacy? If you are, then perfect. ExpressVPN can assist. Even though 96% of stats are made up on the spot, ExpressVPN does give a 100% guarantee via their 30 days back money back guarantee. Now, without further ado, I'm proud to say I'm interviewing Carlos Torres, who is the IT director at Generational Equity.
Thank you, Nick. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for coming on the show. I appreciate it, bud. It's been a couple of years.
It's been a product in the making, but I'm proud to be here and obviously to your side here. I've always admired you. Great friendship, so happy to help.
Thanks again, bud. I really appreciate it. So I know it's been a couple of years since you first got into IT, but I mean, what was that first stage that got you interested in the subject and the industry?
So I got started in IT basically since college, right? Everything back in 1986 was like, you got to be in computers. That's what you have to be. So somehow I got that ridiculous idea of doing it, and been ever since. I started what now I call the dark side, which is the computer science and development and all that. Now then I moved to networking and all that stuff, the background, the infrastructure, and that's why we call software development the dark side. But no, throughout my career, I've had to deal with everything. So I'd like to say I'm not an expert at one thing, but a jack of all trades. That's what I like to call myself.
Absolutely. That's the best way to do it. And then, what was that first role? Was that with the tennis team or the tennis association?
So it was with the Puerto Rician Tennis Association. So I used to play tennis in college. So I knew a little bit, let's say it that way, about the tennis environment back in Puerto Rico, where I'm originally from. So when I was about to graduate in May of 1990, so in April, there was this ad about they were looking for an IT guy in the Puerto Rico Tennis Association. And I said, like, tennis, which I play, and technology, that's a match made in heaven. So I applied, and thankfully, even though I had not graduated yet, they made the exemption so that I could start at least part-time and then full-time once I graduated.
That's great. That's way ahead of the curve. That's awesome.
Yeah, if you want to call it in tennis term, it was a great spin.
Exactly. What were you doing when you first joined the org?
So basically, I was in charge of their technology, which back then was just making sure that the computers were working fine. I was able to manage also the way that the tournaments, the scheduling. There was a software created by the USDA. But then also the person that was in charge of the accounting told me, hey, you are a software programmer. Can you do us the accounting software? Mm-hmm. And that was my first big challenge in technology. I was like, oh, my God, an accounting software. But it was a good learning experience, developing that accounting software, which they used until I left.
Oh, wow.
After that, they started to use QuickBooks and all that stuff. But at the time when I was there, it was that. Also, by the time that I left, it was mainly because I took a networking course to install the first network there. It was a token ring one. So,
oh, really?
Yeah.
So,
back then, token ring was the thing.
So what was that back in the day, just for the folks at home who might not be familiar with the terms?
So token ring is a sequential type of network where a token goes by each of the endpoints, picking up the data or just leaving some data on it. And it goes on a ring because it's just sequential. So you go from one computer to the other in a closed ring. Mm-hmm. So that's why they call them a token ring. It's like a token goes by computer. But it was fun back then. And with that, I was able to go to my next job, which was at Merck Sharp and Dome. And it was because of my stepbrother who was working there at the time said, "Hey, they're needing a networking person there." And I said, "Like, oh yeah, I'm an expert. I already installed one." Little did I know that Token Ring wasn't the only one. You know, it was Ethernet, FDDI, all those other stuff. But you know, it was a learning experience. Everywhere I've been, it's learning a little bit more. So I was in charge there of the networking work.
That's awesome. What was the biggest challenge or one of the most enjoyable moments from that spot in your career?
In my career, or in
Or at that particular place?
in that particular place, I would say it was. They were. I would say we were getting to that Y2K thing,
Yep.
and you know everybody panicked that you know the world's gonna end, the computers are gonna stop. So we were charged back being in Puerto Rico. The Merck used to bring a lot of their new technology just to test it with us. You know, we're not gonna test it in the States. We're gonna test it down there.
Oh, cool.
So it was a good thing to test new things, but also was challenging because there's things that you have to learn on the fly. Even though if you don't know them, you have to adapt to them. So it was good that you learn, but it was challenging that you have to basically learn without any training. It's like, here it is, here's the manuals, and go ahead, make it work.
That's before you can just Google it.
Yeah, there was no Google back then, so definitely that was a challenge.
Absolutely. And was that before you went over to Telefonica?
Yes, from there, I went to Telefonica in Puerto Rico. Telefonica Spain is one of the biggest carriers in the world, and it was even bigger back then. And they had bought a lot of the AT&T properties throughout Latin America.
Really?
And yeah, when AT&T started to sell a lot of the properties in Latin America, Telefonica was taking a lot of them. So they had a lot of, they even tried to buy the incumbent in Puerto Rico that ended up going eventually to Claro from Mexico. But they didn't buy it, so they wanted to have Puerto Rico as a base as well, because Puerto Rico, being a United States territory, has a lot of influence, and it's like a bridge to the States.
Yeah.
But also we're a bridge to the whole Latin America. So we are the best of both worlds in that sense. So Telefonica they opened a base in Miami, Telefonica data in Miami, so we reported to them. And yeah, in there, when I went at the beginning, it was more with being in charge of the installations. But Telefonica had two business units in the world, Telefonica Data and what they call Telefonica Systems, Sistemas in Spanish, which is systems in English. And in 2000, they decided that, hey, systems used to install what data used to sell. And we as Sistemas had to put a markup because we're a company, right? We have to have some margins, even though we're selling to our sister data, and then data would sell it to the companies there. We were basically their installation and consulting angle.
Oh, yeah.
And Telefonica said, look, I'm losing money doing that with that margin. So they merged data and systems into what they call empresas, which is enterprise. And in 2001, a lot of things went haywire, I would say. I was thrown into your installations, your customer service. You have to build a NOC, by the way.
Oh, my gosh.
And you're going to manage the projects. And I was like, are you crazy?
Yeah, those are drastically different roles.
What are you talking to me about? I'm just installing things. Oh, no, you can do that. Don't worry about it. So I had to actually work to build our NOC from scratch and make it 24 hours, by the way.
Oh, my gosh.
So it was a challenging time, but one that I've always enjoyed those challenges, building up from scratch. And I mean, we can be talking all day about what happened in Telefonica, but definitely one of the greatest experiences I've had.
What's the most challenging part about building out your own NOC? Because that's not easy.
Yeah, it's not easy because I didn't even know what a NOC was about.
Oh, really?
Right. So I get all this infrastructure that we have to maintain throughout the whole island. And also we have the clients. So it's not only that whenever there is a solution sold, we have to install it, we have to manage the project, then we have to manage the client and any day-to-day maintenance for that infrastructure. And the most challenging thing was hiring the proper people for that. And then how do you keep, when you make them 24 hours, how are you going to keep those people that are going to be working overnight?
Yeah.
To get them, first of all, get them knowledgeable enough. And one of the things that I've always said is that, I want to have everybody that works for me, the technicians, if it was on the knock, if you're level 1, you're going to be very knowledgeable. So how do you challenge them to become knowledgeable? Okay, you're going to offer them, since we were starting basically to build all these teams from scratch, the challenge was you learn enough and we're going to teach you, but if you show that interest and you progress, then you're going to move to another one, to another position that we were having. And the challenge for the overnights were learn enough so you can be on the day shop.
Oh, really?
And that was incredible. I mean, he created a great challenge for a lot of those guys. I'm proud to say, I mean, most of them moved to better positions, and they're right now in other companies as well, and they have progressed incredibly. And it was a great environment to work at that time.
And what was the biggest? Was the knock the biggest challenge that you had while you were working there?
I would say so, yeah. Yeah, because I was thrown into all those things at the same time. Eventually, I was moved. We started to grow so much that then I was able to then have somebody for the project management, somebody for the installations, somebody for the service. So eventually, when we had that, I was moved into a systems engineering management position. So it was now pre-sales, which I used to call the bad side.
Yeah.
Whatever they're selling, they don't know what they're selling.
Yeah.
But now I had to be part of that, and not only that, manage them. It was like my price for trying to say, hey, you don't know how to do it, then you go do it. But then I really learned how to appreciate their work. And it is really, it challenged me to become more knowledgeable about the systems and how to then now instead of installing them, hey, you have to sell it. Yeah. And how do you talk to C-level people? And you go and do presentations, and you go and do some conferences, because then you have to talk about that. You're the expert. You have to show your company, all that stuff. So, yeah, that turned me into that pre-sales systems engineering role, which then after that I learned to love.
Well, that's an important role. I mean, half of it is just poking the sales reps and making sure they're honest. Be like, well, we can do that, but here's a specific scenario, and here's what it's going to take to actually deliver those results.
Yeah, and one of the things that we usually used to say is, hey, why are you selling that? That's not a product I have.
Oh, no.
And they would say, well, I sold it, so you have to install it.
Oh, gosh.
So, that was part of it. How to compromise and say, okay, let's see how we do it. It was already sold.
Yeah, no pressure. Here's what we already sold. We got the PO. We got everything.
You gotta make it happen.
Yeah, make magic happen. That's what IT does. Like,
so back then it was like, why did you do that? Then when I'm on that side, I say, now I know why.
Yeah, it's like that's what it. Yeah,
we have to sell it.
Yeah, the CIOs, the CEOs, they want those business outcomes. It's like, all right, now we got to navigate this maze. How do we get there? Because we got to make sure we get there.
Definitely.
Then after that, you head over to, was that OpenLink?
OpenLink, yeah. So there's, OpenLink is one of the biggest Cisco partners in the CANSAC area, which is the Central America, Caribbean, and South America region. And they were expanding from Venezuela. They wanted to open offices in Colombia, in Puerto Rico, and other places throughout the Caribbean. But again, knowing that Puerto Rico is like a center hub to hop to other places, they decided to go to Puerto Rico first. And Cisco helped them out.
Oh, really?
At the time, I'll help them out, like tell them, hey, this is a good place for you to, I was being such a good partner. Cisco just told them, hey, here it is. And at the beginning, they would throw out some names on who to hire, and one of those names was mine. Oh, wow. And so I became hired by OpenLink.
So Cisco threw out your name, or
yes?
Oh, that's a huge praise.
Oh well,
yeah,
sort of.
Oh, absolutely.
But anyway, yeah, I got there, and it was great because again, it was a building from scratch thing. Not OpenLink because OpenLink was big enough in Venezuela, but for the Caribbean part, an open market in the Caribbean, which was the purpose of why OpenLink was opening there. and we were able to do some very good things. I would say that Curacao was one of our biggest markets there as well. Besides Puerto Rico, Curacao became our biggest challenge, and the biggest client that we were able to have was the UTS, which was the big carrier from the island. And UTS is owned by the government.
Oh,
So
really?
UTS had like the monopoly of all telecommunications there. But at the time, they were having the challenge because there was another company that was starting to get into the market, and they were trying to get back then a DSL market open, challenging what UTS was having. And the way that we became to go there, we actually competed against IBM for a solution to get some big routers, which was the CRS routers, in the NAP of the Americas in Miami,
Really?
connect them directly to their Curacao. And also, in partnership with Ericsson, we were able to do the DSL network locally, but the internet drain was with those CRS routers. So we were, that's one of my proudest moments. We competed against IBM, the big one.
Yeah.
And of course, Cisco gave both of us the same chance. They were not having a preferred partner at the time.
Yeah.
They said, hey, you guys compete there. So there were 3 companies, but the big one really was IBM. So
That's
we
huge.
went one day there and did the presentation the whole morning. We knew that that afternoon IBM was going to present. And at the time, then we went to lunch and we would say, okay, let's see how it goes. And the fact that the operations director and the special consultant that they had stayed longer with us, even missing some of the first part of the IBM
That's a good sign.
presentation, that was the sign. I was telling our GM, hey, we got it. I think we got it, because they wouldn't stay here if they wouldn't be interested.
Absolutely. What was the pivotal moment, or can you feel like there's a certain part of the proposal that put you over the top or really got their interest?
I actually think and this is a feeling I get, but it's what I think my engineer, my top engineer that was with me at that time, because I was in the presentation, I had his backup in case I mess up any technology I would mention, right?
Yeah.
So I guess that the thing was, there was a big question they made about the future of the CRS routers, which Cisco was changing, and they were talking about what would happen to the controller card if they were going to change it, because they were actually introducing the three model that we were proposing, the CRS1. So we had Cisco on our chat, and one of their engineers, they made the question, and my engineer immediately chatted with him, and he got the answer. We got it to them right there on the spot. This is what's going to happen, and this is what it is. And I think that impressed them, that we were able to get that kind of connection with Cisco directly, which when you're a smaller company, you get that type of connection with the engineers, right? If you're an IBM, you have to go through some channels to go get all that stuff. But definitely, I think at that time, I kind of felt from them, from the group that was there, that they got all their questions answered immediately. We were the people that were actually close, like we were saying, to the Cisco people, and we were going to be able to deliver on what they needed to.
That's astonishing. I mean, IBM's been around since most people have been alive, or actually more than that.
More than me, so yeah. More than I've been alive, and I think they were already old.
Yeah.
And I was alive.
They've come a long way from making scales.
They do.
And then what was it like going to, was it NPR Solutions?
Yeah, so NPR Solutions was another MSP in Puerto Rico. So I got the opportunity. At that time, I had 2 choices. One, Fortinet, and the other one was NPR Solutions. I'm not going to go into the details of why I decided to go to NPR Solutions. I really had a great choice on trying to go to Fortinet, but at the end of the day, it was also the challenge of having something started from scratch. And not scratch because they were already established, but they were known more as a PBX voice VoIP company. They would have other products, but that was their main. They were great, one of the preferred Nortel partners back in the day. But they wanted to expand the products to more data as well, which was my expertise at that time. So as a way to grow again, and started to have that challenge, I started to work with NPR Solutions and opening that market with the data products infrastructure as well, having that to create that new portfolio for them at that time.
It's always just so much more fun and challenging to just build something from nothing. I mean, there's a lot of freedom that comes along with it. You could just choose how everything works out. I mean, that was almost half the reason I started my company, just because I wanted a challenge. I wanted to have basically unlimited freedom to think outside the box of how you do everything.
Definitely. I make the analogy of, and it may sound right or not, but if you are building a snowman from scratch, you get to control everything and how it's going to look. But if it's already built, there's so much that you can do to change it, right? You
Absolutely.
have to either scratch it and just start again, or just there's a little things that you're going to be able to do. So building something from scratch gives you the control and how is it going to look. And if they give you the opportunity to really form it like you want and based on your experience and how you know that you have been doing things, that makes it more like for you to do it, right? It's more enjoyable.
Absolutely, I agree. And then what was the pivotal moment where you kind of you knew you wanted to move from Puerto Rico to Texas, or U.S. and then to Texas?
So my wife and I have always wanted to we had long decided when we were starting our relationship that at some point we're going to move to the States. Mm-hmm. Things in Puerto Rico started to get a little challenging on the economy. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people started to look at opportunities in the States. And we thought at that time that would be the perfect time for us to start to see where to go. Mm-hmm. So a couple of years we went to here. We decided first it's going to be in Texas. Then we made a visit 2013 here to see where in Texas. Mm. Then the next year was where in Plano where we're going to live, which is where we live now. And eventually in 2015, we decided that we were going to make a jump, but I started to come here first and look for a job here. So we actually took the leap of faith. I left my job, which I had, even though we were having some, I'm not going to say I was out of job, but challenges that came there. You had to take instead of 5 days, work 4, and
Oh, they're starting to cut back on hours, trying to cut costs.
Right.
Oh,
so
that's not good. That's usually a concerning sign.
It is, but we knew it's temporary. But at the same time, you have bills to pay and all that stuff.
Unfortunately,
and a family, so you have to take a decision. So at that time, I took the leap of faith and coming here, and started to look for a job.
Now, out of curiosity, what inspired you to Texas specifically? I mean, obviously it's the best state.
No, definitely it had. We did a lot of research and stuff, and definitely it came out on top.
Oh,
with all the quality of life and everything that we were looking for, all the parameters. We did a lot of, and besides, my wife doesn't like cold weather.
Oh,
I always joke with everybody like, hey, and this is a joke. So when my wife watches this, sorry, honey. But here's, if you saw the movie The Day After Tomorrow, if you remember when the guy was saying, okay, so what do you suggest? And then he goes to the map of the states and say, okay, from here down, you evacuate everybody.
Yeah.
So she said, okay, from here down is where we're going to live. So, that was it. Basically, from those states, and we decided, okay, Texas is definitely the one to be.
And you made a great choice. I mean, Texas is a new, especially DFW, it's a new Silicon Valley. I mean, pretty much every IT company either has an office in Texas or they're moving their headquarters to Texas. Yeah. I mean, HP, Oracle, CrowdStrike, they're all headquartered in Texas now, and it's only growing from there.
No, definitely, and that's one of the things that we also saw. Since my job is based on technology, definitely, that was one of the biggest draws for us to be here.
It's the best market. I mean, no one will ever be out of a job. Knock on epoxied wood, like in DFW.
Let's do that.
Yeah, exactly. It's like half my conversations these days are talking to clients and be like, okay, we have this opening. You've had this opening for about a year now. We can't find anyone. What realistically are we going to do? I mean, we got to do a supplemental service or contracting. I mean, And it doesn't help when you have, the largest companies in the world, they're constantly throwing money at all these prospective new hires. So even if you get an offer out, I mean, they might go with a bigger company because they get stock options and or just a lot of cash. I mean, it is incredibly competitive in DFW.
I agree, and that's what makes it also a challenge to be here.
Oh,
You have to stay
absolutely.
on top of everything. Otherwise, the competition is
It's
going
fierce.
to take over. Yeah.
And it's like growing with, every week I read another headline. Oh yeah, they're moving to Texas too. I'm like, well, I'm not surprised. It's like, it's the place to be. It's like, I think it was a couple weeks ago, Wells Fargo was like, oh yeah, we're going to relocate another, 4,000 plus employees to Las Colinas, Irving area because they have more offices and it's growing exponentially.
Hey, even the PGA of America is moving
Yep.
to Frisco.
Have you seen their office yet?
Yeah,
It is
it's amazing what
immaculate.
they're building there. It's incredible.
It is.
So coming from sunny
Yeah.
Florida to coming to Tornado Alley, that's just
Oh yeah.
incredible.
Exactly. I don't know. It's a good place. And then what's the biggest challenge you first joined generational equity?
So we had a, I want to call it a legacy infrastructure. So our executive team challenged us with they have a plan of growth for the company. So we have to make sure that our technology matches those growth plans. And at the time, that legacy infrastructure that we had the challenge of not being scalable. So the challenge for us was to start building something again from scratch.
Yep.
Not from scratch because there's this infrastructure, but replacing it with one that it actually matches those expectations from the company. And providing the resiliency, the redundancies, everything that can be possible so we can maintain as much as possible the uptime that they request and be able to be flexible to start adding, like we've added some companies and we haven't had to replace the infrastructure. We were able to forecast that growth. So one of the things that I've learned since my Telefonica days was you have to forecast and plan capacity planning for those growths. Otherwise, you're going to be running out of space pretty quick. So one of the things that we do is we do oversubscribe so that we know that whenever that growth comes, we're there for it. So that was the big challenge, how to forecast without knowing exactly what that growth was going to be.
Yep.
And have the equipment in place to actually manage that.
I mean, of all the things IT can be, it cannot be a bottleneck for the business.
It cannot be. And also, you have to maintain, because being on the financial industry, as you know, 23.6% of the attacks go to the financial industry, which is the biggest by far of all other industries. So that is another challenge. Just keep that information secure for our clients.
Absolutely. I mean, finance is every hacker's dream. I mean, they know the money is there.
Yep. And we're not exempt to it. Of course, we sell the reports from our systems and all that, so we know they're knocking on the door, but we try to keep them at bay as much as possible.
Yep. As long as they don't get in, that's the key, though.
Yep. we try to keep them down. And so far, let me knock on wood again.
There you go.
We're good. So far.
Then kind of going back to your favorite thing of rebuilding things from the ground up. I mean, what inspired you to start your golf podcast?
So that's wow, that's a long story. It's 10 years ago.
Oh wow!
So
and what's it called again? Because
the back 9 report.
So I'll tag it in the video as well.
Oh, perfect.
So the YouTube video is called the Back 9 Report.
Yes.
Perfect. Are you guys on the Google Podcasts and Spotify and stuff too?
So we have a YouTube and we are also on Blog Talk Radio. That's how we started. So basically, what happened was my late father, he used to be a radio personality, and he used to have these shows in the tri-state area, especially based in New Jersey, Vineland, New Jersey. And he started to get me to do some radio interventions in sports for him.
Oh, really?
For the shows that he had there on Saturdays in the morning and in the afternoon.
How old were you when you were doing that?
I'm sorry?
How old were you when you were doing that? That's awesome.
It was in 2008 and 2009 that I started with him.
Yeah.
So after a few years, Bleacher Report reached out to me on an email. Hey, I see that you're writing and talking about the sports. Would you like to? My life passion is horse racing.
Yeah.
So I used to talk a lot about horse racing, and I used to in Puerto Rico cover that. I used to have a web page for news called Noti Reportes, and the website is notireportes.com. I don't keep it anymore since I left, but that allowed me. I used it as a okay. I'm gonna get into concerts, into sports events, and with
yeah.
that because now I have a press pass.
Yeah, good
So
idea.
the thing was, I used to talk a lot about sports, but mainly about horse racing, and that's how Bleacher Report got to me. But in 2011, the Open Championship, um, the editor from that I was reporting to said, "Hey, I'm running short in riders for golf. Would you like to ride for the Open?" And I said, "Yeah, sure, no problem. I mean, why not? I
Yeah.
don't know anything about what's going to happen this year, but I will try." And funny enough, I was able. They give you this rundowns about topics that you can write about, and it's the first come first serve.
Really?
I came late to it, so I started getting whatever was left. And there's a schedule, and they tell you when this article should be is going to be ready, and you should publish it, and it's going to come out. So at that time, I started writing whatever was left for me to write about, and it was about the Open Championship. And I became the second highest read, second, yeah, I finished second in reads that month of July.
That's
After
great.
that, from August to July of next year, I was the top writer for golf. I don't know why
It's
or
phenomenal.
how, but it was it, and I was like, wow, incredible.
Yeah.
Now the one that finished second on those months, his name is Fred Alvader, and he's a writer and a golf pro, teaching pro from Ohio, and he's also part of the Golf Writers Association for America. And he finished second there, and he was always like, "How you do it, man? You keep beating me up and all that stuff." And I said, "I don't know, man. I don't know. It's just writing what it is."
Yeah.
And the thing from there, we we became invited by a venture capitalist that opened edraft.com, and he wanted us to be writers with them. And we brought along another person from Bleacher Report. His name is Kieran Clark, who's now the editor of Golf Check in Scotland. So he's from
Cool.
Scotland. He lives right in front of St. Andrews. And we started to write for eDraft instead of Bleacher Report because we went there. But eDraft had this vision of having podcasts about every sport
Yeah.
from writers that they had. So they had Fred and me started to do that, called the Back Nine Report, presented by eDraft.com at the time.
Cool.
So we wrote and did the podcast with them for 5 years.
Oh,
After
wow.
that, eDraft started changing their model to be more fantasy based, fantasy play.
Right.
And well, there wasn't that much good for golf at that time.
Yeah.
So at that point, we decided, hey, this is not the focus that we're going to have. So we started to do from Unblock Talk Radio. We took over and we took it on our own and been there ever since.
That's awesome. Were you a little scared, or were you excited to kind of venture off on your own, or what was that
No,
like?
because we already were doing it.
Yeah.
So we knew we just kept the product the same. It was a weekly show. We had an hour or an hour and a half, depending if there were majors. We have kept the same format of bringing Kieran to our podcast, and we get the European. I call him the European golf guru because he's like a historian of golf. You ask him anything, and he'll start. Well, in Genesis, they started talking about golf, and I'm joking, Kieran, but anyway, he's really knowledgeable. I mean, I wish I could know about a quarter of what he knows, and he's funny and all that. And we actually have won 2 awards
Oh, that's great.
with 2 specific shows in 2020 and 2019 and 2020. And it was the Solheim Cup preview and then the Ryder Cup preview the next year. So, and it was with him, so all 3 were part of it. And it's been fun. I mean, it's great to talk about it. We have also changed throughout the years. The format of it, we started with that 1 hour or 1 hour and a half show, but the smart brevity concept of saying more with less.
Yep.
So now what we do is just bullet things. So this is a topic, and we talk about it for 10 to 15 minutes, and that's it. So we can do many of those smaller podcasts, and that's what we're doing now.
What's the biggest challenge that you've had by just trying to grow the podcast and kind of keep evolving it?
Yeah, just knowing really what drives the listeners to do, because there would be some, I guess, a lot of that we have learned is the Asian fans or listeners, whenever you talk about those players, we get a lot of views and a lot of reads. It's like
Really?
incredible. And like our top podcast shows have been about Asian players. Nowadays, with the LIV golf thread to the PGA Tour, anytime we talk about that, it's like, wow, that's a lot of things. But you can talk about other things, and it's not as much receptive. So it's like getting to know really what takes the listeners to get you to listen to you and view you. That's what really has been the challenge. And I still haven't been able to figure it out.
Well,
I wish I could know.
That's a multi-million-dollar question. Is
Yep.
what is exactly what the consumer wants, or what's really going to have those freakonomics moments where you just have those crazy outliers just grows exponentially with the hockey stick trajectory.
Yeah.
I mean, that's so difficult. Do you use the analytic tools where it'll tell you like everywhere all over the globe where they're downloading the podcast, they're viewing, and
Yeah, I mean, you get the analytics, and that's how you know that the Asian, those Asian, when we have talked about like Hideki Matsuyama when he won the major, when Yuka Sasso won hers, when Patty Tavatanakit won. So those Asian players, anytime that they have won something big and we have talked about them, it's like the biggest ones. I mean,
Really?
it's incredible. And when you see the analytics, a lot of the Asian countries, actually, it's not only the States, it's more external that we get, which makes you think, well, how do they get that? But then you see how they're reaching you is through the YouTube, the keywords that you're using. So, yeah, but still, even though you see all that, try to replicate it. I wish somebody could tell me how to replicate it all the time.
it's like that's the secret. It's like how do you replicate that success and keep it growing?
Yep.
I wonder if it's because that's the area of the globe where golf is starting to have the largest or the biggest increase of consumer demand, or there's more people getting into the sports in those regions, or I wonder what's driving behind it. There's so many. It's hard to know. There's so many variables.
Well, I can tell you this, and no knock to the States fans, right? But when you see the South Korean females playing and how they have been dominating for years in the LPGA, and it's the dedication and the way that they do dedicate their craft. And I remember when I was in Puerto Rico covering the Puerto Rico Open in golf, there was Ryo Ichikawa back then was the guy in Japan. Even though he hasn't been winning in the PGA Tour, he came to Puerto Rico, and I remember him having to set up a special site. Whenever he finishes his round, he was having this big area where the Asian reporters would come, especially the ones from Japan, and talk to him. And it was like, you have to wait because they have to talk to him first, then you have access to him. But it was crazy because it was like double the size of whoever was going to be after that talking to him.
Oh my gosh!
And it was an entourage of reporters covering him, and you would say, why? He's not even the biggest star in golf. He was back there, but then it tells you how really big the fans go out there to follow their actual players. And it's that way in every sport, really. Outside of the States, especially in the Asian market where you see, we call it the next frontier in golf, definitely, which is why the LIV Golf is investing so much in them. Definitely, you see a lot of more passion to it. And I would say the analogy to this is like soccer, right? Soccer is the world number one sport by far. And here in the States, it's growing, but it's not even close to what it's still outside of the States.
Yeah.
Right? So you see that because that's where their own players, you can identify more with them. And even though you can try to expect the same thing from the fans here, it's not the same passion as that. And I remember in 1992 when the Dream Team was playing in the Spain Olympics, there was this article. And it always, I remember like it was yesterday. There is this guy that went to the Philippines, and he sees this younger kids, I would say teenagers playing basketball. And one of them, he offers them, hey, here's a Michael Jordan shirt. Do you want it? Oh, yeah, sure. He took it, he put it, and he started playing. Then he says, okay, hey, I have this Romario shirt, the biggest star in soccer back then.
Yeah.
Do you want it? Oh, yes, I want it. Oh, one catch. I need that Jordan shirt. He took it off like nothing. Here
Really?
Give it to me. So it tells you really how big that is and how fans are really about their players back then, outside of here. So I think that passion that they exhibit, and I'm not saying anything bad about the States at all.
Of course.
Don't take it that way. But you identify more because the States is the biggest country, the most powerful one, and maybe it's diluted, the passion on it, right? But in any other country, when you go against that big power and you beat them or you're having more success or challenging, that's where they actually, take that passion on.
Absolutely. I mean, that's the whole topic in and of itself. It's fascinating to see, which sports and which things are, fail or aren't fiscally appealing, or, they just aren't profitable or they don't work in the U.S., but in other countries, they're, they knock it out of the park 10 days a week. I mean, I know the NBA is growing exponentially in China the past, 36 months. I mean, that's why they're investing so much there because, of course, they have a huge market and, just copy paste, just play basketball over there.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show, bud. I really appreciate it.
No problem. Anytime. Thank you for everything.
Thanks again, Carlos. Appreciate
Great
it.
seeing you.
Great seeing you too. Thanks everyone for listening. Don't forget to like, subscribe, comment, share, tell your friends, tell your family, tell your coworkers, tell your enemies, tell anyone. All stay safe. Thank you. You have a great day. Topping Talks.